My name is Jane, I'm 34 years old, and 3 months ago I was still a happy wife. But on my nephew's first birthday, my younger sister, Melissa, stood before the whole family, held up her baby, and declared, "This is Mark's child, your late husband's." Then she pulled out a will, demanding half of my house, worth $800,000. The entire room went silent. Me. I laughed. Because there was one truth Melissa could never have imagined, and it changed everything. If it were you, how would you react when your own sister used your husband's name to spin a lie? Leave a comment, hit like, and subscribe to my channel so we can stay connected. What happened next? I'll tell you right now. I still remember the first day I met Mark as if it happened yesterday. It was an early autumn evening in Boston, the sky turning lavender and pink while a crisp chill crept through the old brick streets. I was volunteering at a charity auction fundraiser for children with cancer. My job was simple: arrange the silent auction items, check guest lists, and greet people. I had no idea that among the hundreds of faces that night, one man would change the entire course of my life. He walked in wearing a dark blue suit, his tie neat, but there was a warmth in his eyes that was hard to put into words. Not the distant look you often see on lawyers or successful businessmen, but the kind of gaze that showed he genuinely cared about what was happening around him. I noticed his name, Mark Preston, appear again and again on the bidding sheet for a landscape painting. It was the same painting I had quietly stared at all evening. A Boston sunset where orange and purple tones streaked across the sky like soft ribbons. I never imagined anyone would notice how long I had been standing there. At the end of the auction, Mark won. Yet instead of proudly showing off his win, he walked straight toward me, placed the painting in my hands, and smiled. "I saw you looking at it from the very beginning. Maybe it belongs to you more than to me." Flustered, my heart racing, I didn't even have time to react before he reached out and took my hand. "I'm Mark." "And you are?" Jane, I whispered. In that moment, every sound in the ballroom seemed to fade away. I never expected someone so thoughtful to notice such small details. But that attention to detail was exactly what drew me to him, fast and fiercely. We went on our first date just one day later. I still remember that night. He took me for a walk along the Charles River. Boston was glowing, and in the city lights reflected on the water, he told me about his dream of becoming a lawyer back when he was a student. He didn't brag about his achievements. He spoke calmly, as if winning a case wasn't nearly as important as helping someone find justice. It felt like we found a familiar rhythm together. After 8 months, Mark proposed at the harbor, right in front of a real sunset like the one in that painting that had brought us together. After the wedding, we bought an old house in Beacon Hill. Built more than a century ago with red brick walls, white framed windows, and a slanted roof. It wasn't perfect. The paint was peeling, the plumbing leaked, the backyard was full of weeds. But to us it looked like a blank page waiting for us to write our story on it. During those early days we laughed more than we complained. I sketched out redesigns room by room, while Mark rolled up his sleeves to paint walls, install bookshelves, and even taught himself how to fix pipes by watching tutorial videos. At night we sat among cardboard boxes in the living room, eating pizza and talking about the future. Once he said, "Jane, every paint stain on my hands today is a promise that this place will become our home." And I believed him. But all happiness has its empty spaces. For us, it was the fact that we could not have a child. In the early years we tried everything: timing, medicine, hope followed by disappointment. Each failed cycle was like a small cut, not fatal but slowly wearing down the heart. Then came the IVF rounds. Anyone who hasn't gone through it can't truly understand what it's like when your body turns into a schedule of needles, hormonal injections, and constant ultrasounds. I remember the final round, when the doctor called to tell us it had failed. We drove home in silence. I leaned my head against the window while Mark held my hand on the gearshift. Neither of us said a word, but we both knew that road had reached its end. That night, on the wooden swing on our back porch, Mark pulled me close and said, "Jane, I know we dreamed of a house filled with children's laughter. But if that dream never comes, we still have the most precious thing. You and me. As long as I have you, I have enough." Tears streamed down my face because I knew I was loved in the deepest way. Shortly after, Mark had surgery for varicocele. The doctor advised getting a vasectomy to prevent long-term complications. I remember him holding my hand outside the operating room. "I know this means we'll never have biological children. Do you regret it?" "No, Mark. I don't need anyone else but you." We agreed to keep it private, Not out of shame, but because we were exhausted by the constant whispers and repetitive question, "When are you having kids?" It was our privacy, a small secret that protected our fragile happiness. Instead of staying sad, we filled our lives with other things. We traveled from old European cobblestone streets to small New England towns. We grew our careers together. Mark became a partner at a law firm and I opened my own interior design company. Our Beacon Hill home became a showcase of both love and hard work. Every wall and every decoration carried traces of our hands. There were nights when I was still drafting designs for clients at a late hour and Mark walked in with 2 cups of coffee. He would place a hand on my shoulder and say, "Don't forget we built this house to live in, not to turn it into an all-night office." He was always the one reminding me to stay balanced so I wouldn't work so much that I forgot to live. In return, I was the one who urged him to rest between stressful cases, convincing him to sit out in the backyard and read instead of burying himself in documents. I used to think, maybe we didn't have children, but we had discovered how to live a full life. One life with 2 people, one home, one love big enough to make up for everything we didn't have. I have a younger sister, Melissa, 4 years younger than me. From the outside, people might think we were 2 ordinary sisters, raised in a middle-class family in the suburbs of Boston, attended public schools, and spent Sunday evenings eating dinner together. But the truth was very different. Since childhood, Melissa had always been the little princess in our parents' eyes. She had been strikingly beautiful even as a teenager. Bouncy blonde hair, a radiant smile, blue eyes that knew how to draw attention. While I buried myself in books and sketchpads, Melissa always knew how to become the center of every gathering. The moment she walked into a room, she drew everyone's eyes, and my parents would sigh and say, "Melissa is so charming. Jane, you need to be more outgoing." I never blamed my parents, but I knew those comparisons planted something else in Melissa. The feeling that every achievement of mine was something she had to surpass. Even small things, test scores, clothes I wore, friends I made, Melissa wanted to match them or do better. When I met Mark and started dating him, I had a gut feeling my sister would react the way she always did, with jealousy, trying to step into a spotlight that wasn't hers. But I never imagined things would turn out the way they eventually did. At first, the signs were subtle. At family dinners, I caught Melissa looking at Mark longer than necessary. It wasn't the look of a sister toward her future brother-in-law. It carried something curious, probing, and sometimes challenging. I remember once, after we were officially engaged, Melissa leaned over to pour wine for Mark. Her hand stayed on his arm a little too long, her fingertip brushing lightly as if by accident. I frowned, but Mark quickly pulled his arm away and changed the subject. That night, when we were alone in the kitchen, he sighed, "Jane, I think you should know. Melissa is being a little too familiar." "Are you sure?" I asked, half wanting to believe it, half not. "I don't want to hide anything from you. I feel like she's testing the boundaries." Melissa had competed with me over everything before, but when it came to love, especially with Mark, I never thought she would dare. In the months that followed, I started paying closer attention. Sure enough, Melissa always found ways to insert herself between me and my husband. At family parties, she laughed louder when Mark spoke or suddenly switched seats to sit beside him. Once I accidentally saw a message Melissa sent Mark late at night. "Brother-in-law, I guess Jane is asleep, right? I wanted to ask you something about the law." Mark showed it to me immediately without deleting anything, without hiding a thing. He said, "I didn't reply and I don't want her thinking I'm encouraging this." I hugged him, grateful yet afraid. Grateful that Mark was loyal and honest. Afraid because Melissa was getting bolder and my parents, as always, kept making excuses for her. I tried talking to Mom. One afternoon, while she was peeling apples in the kitchen, I cautiously said, "Mom, I think Melissa is acting a bit inappropriate with Mark. I'm not comfortable with it." Mom looked up and frowned. "Jane, you're too sensitive. Melissa has always been that way. She's friendly and warm. You shouldn't think badly of your sister." I swallowed hard. How could I explain the difference between being friendly and overstepping? To Mom, Melissa would always be the child who needed protecting. Another time at Christmas dinner, as everyone raised their glasses for a toast, I saw Melissa whisper something to Mark. He looked at me immediately, then gently shook his head as if to tell me he wasn't playing along with her game. After the meal, Mark took my hand and pulled me into the backyard. "Jane, I can see you're upset. I want you to know nothing could ever sway me." I rested my head on his shoulder, feeling his familiar warmth. But deep inside, I knew Melissa wouldn't stop easily. More and more situations like that kept happening. She found excuses to come to my house to borrow books, asked Mark to explain her rental contract, or accidentally showed up at the cafes we frequented. Once, Mark told me Melissa had even gone to his office, saying she wanted to discuss career guidance. He turned her down flat but still told me because he didn't want any shadows between us. I slowly realized something. What Melissa wanted wasn't necessarily Mark, but the feeling of beating me. It was the same old game from childhood. When I was praised for good grades, she tried to outshine me in another way. When I had a beautiful love, she wanted to prove she could take away what mattered most. Many times I wondered, maybe I hadn't said enough to my sister? Maybe the age gap meant we never truly understood each other? But whenever I tried to bridge the distance, I got cold looks or snide remarks in return. Mark always told me, "Don't stress too much, Jane. I'm here. I choose you. No one can change that." I tried to believe it wouldn't go too far. But somewhere inside me, a growing unease spread, like dark clouds gathering before a storm. And I was right. Melissa didn't stop at looks or vague messages. She went further than I could ever have imagined. That morning started like any other. Mark woke up earlier than I did, brewed a pot of coffee, and sat reading over materials for an important meeting. When I walked out of the bedroom, he looked up and smiled. "Jane, I have a bit of a headache. Probably just stress." I placed my hand on his shoulder, worried. "Maybe you should stay home today. A meeting can wait, your health can't." He shook his head and kissed my forehead gently. "I'm fine. I promise I'll call you after the meeting." Those were the last words I ever heard from him. Around 2 in the afternoon, the phone rang, but it wasn't Mark. It was a strange woman's voice from the hospital. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Preston. Your husband was brought in due to a ruptured brain aneurysm. He didn't make it." The world collapsed around me. I sank to the floor, hands trembling around the phone. Every sound vanished. There was only my racing heartbeat and a bottomless emptiness opening in front of me. The funeral took place on a gloomy morning. The old church in Beacon Hill was filled with white flowers and the somber sound of an organ. I stood beside the casket, feeling as if I were trapped in a blurry dream. So many people came, Mark's colleagues, our friends, even neighbors we barely knew. Everyone cried, saying Mark was a good man, a rare kind of husband. But Melissa, she arrived late, wearing a black dress far too short for such a mournful occasion. She brushed past me so quickly I didn't even get to take her hand. Instead of hugging me or offering comfort, she simply whispered, "Sorry, sis. Lucas has a fever, so I can't stay long." And she left before the ceremony even ended, leaving me with a confusion I couldn't place. In the most heartbreaking moment of my life, I didn't feel the presence of my own sister. In the days that followed, I lived like a ghost. Each morning, I still turned to Mark's side of the bed, hoping to see him there, only to find a cold pillow. I wandered through every room he had touched, every item he had once fixed, drowning in grief. A week later, Mom called to remind me to attend Lucas's first birthday. I wanted to refuse. The thought of music, children's laughter, it made my chest tighten. But Mom insisted, "You have to be there, Jane. Mark always said family was most important. He would want you to go." So I put on a simple black dress, hid the circles under my eyes with a touch of makeup, and drove to Melissa's small rental house. I brought a carefully wrapped gift I had bought before Mark died, a wooden block set. The moment I stepped in, I sensed something strange. Unknown guests stared and went quiet as I passed. My parents sat in the corner, faces tense. I thought they were worried about me, but no. They knew a storm was coming. Melissa walked out holding Lucas. The baby wore a new outfit, his hair neatly curled, eyes bright like he was about to perform. She tapped her spoon against a glass, signaling for silence. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate Lucas's birthday," she said dramatically. "Today I have a truth I must share." My heart tightened, instinct telling me something terrible was coming. Melissa smoothed her hair, looked straight at me, and announced, "Lucas isn't Tyler's son. He's Mark's, Jane's husband." The entire backyard went silent. I heard sharp breaths, shocked gasps. My father froze and my mother looked down, avoiding my gaze. I stood rooted, ears ringing, as if the words couldn't possibly be real. But Melissa kept going. She pulled a folded document from her purse and held it up. "This is the will Mark wrote before he died." He wanted his son taken care of, so he left half of his $800,000 house to Lucas. Everyone stared at me, some pitying, some curious. But to everyone's surprise, I didn't cry or scream. I pressed my lips together and wanted to laugh. It was ridiculous, shameless. Because only Mark and I knew the truth. He had surgery 2 years earlier, making it impossible for him to father a child. Yet my sister chose this day, right after I lost my husband, to stage this dramatic lie. "May I see that will, Melissa?" She hesitated, then handed it to me. I glanced at it. Immediately, I recognized the handwriting was off, the wording unlike Mark's legal style. The forgery was obvious. I folded it back, handed it over, and softly said, "Thank you." The crowd murmured. Melissa frowned. "You're not going to deny it? This is Lucas's birthday. We'll talk in private." I turned my back and walked away, leaving behind a swirl of whispers. But inside I knew one thing. The real battle had only just begun. I drove away from Lucas's birthday party feeling torn between fury and bitter amusement. Watching my own sister boldly declare her son to be Mark's child, in front of me, our parents, and dozens of acquaintances, felt like an embarrassingly clumsy stage play. But what made me laugh through the pain was Melissa's shamelessness, not realizing her lie was biologically impossible. That night, I sat alone in the living room, the warm yellow light falling across the walls we had painted together. My trembling hand rested on the safe deposit box. In my mind, I heard Mark's last words before his surgery 2 years ago. "Jane, I'm sorry, but I have to do this for my health. I know we've tried for years, but maybe our journey to have a child ends here." I squeezed his hand tightly, then, swallowing my sadness, and only said, "The only thing I need is you." We had kept that secret for 2 years, telling no one, not even our parents. We didn't want the gossip, the pitying looks. And now, that very secret had become the strongest proof that Melissa was lying. The next morning, I went to the bank where Mark and I kept our safe deposit box. The branch manager, an elderly man with silver hair who had known Mark, shook my hand and spoke with deep sorrow. "Jane, I was devastated to hear about Mark. He was a wonderful client and a good man." I couldn't bring myself to speak much. He led me into a private room and handed me a black metal box. I sat down, heart pounding, and opened it. Inside was a treasure, not of money, but of protection Mark had quietly prepared for me. First was the official will, notarized, signed by attorney Richard Hale, Mark's close friend. It clearly stated, all assets, including the Beacon Hill house, my design company, and every joint savings account, were left to me. Not a single line mentioned Lucas, or any supposed illegitimate child, as Melissa claimed. Next, I saw a tidy medical file. My eyes burned as I read the cold line: patient, Mark Preston, procedure, bilateral vasectomy, date, 2 years before Lucas was born. Attached were post-surgery test results confirming he could no longer father children. I gripped the papers, hurting yet relieved. Those dry hospital documents were undeniable proof that Melissa's story was a cheap fabrication. Then I found a brown leather notebook. As soon as I opened it, I recognized Mark's handwriting. He had recorded every time Melissa crossed the line. Dates, locations, the ambiguous comments she'd made. For example, May 12th. Melissa texted at 11 p.m. asking if I was lonely. Deleted message, but told Jane. Or, August 3rd. Melissa showed up at the office without warning, asked me to lunch. I declined. Told Jane immediately when I got home. Reading those notes, I felt both heartbroken and proud. Heartbroken that Mark had endured discomfort from my sister. Proud that he had chosen honesty, never hiding a thing from me, and even documented it, almost as if he knew this day would come. Finally, at the bottom of the box, was a cream envelope with his familiar, bold handwriting. For Jane, open only when needed. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a letter. My dearest Jane, if you are reading this, then the worst has happened. I am no longer there beside you. But I tried to prepare everything to protect you even if I'm gone. I know Melissa, with her nature, might try to hurt you. I'm not sure how, but I believe you'll need these proofs to protect yourself. Remember, you are not fighting alone. I'm with you, in every document, every memory, every brick of our house. Don't let anyone take away what we built together. I love you, Jane, beyond time and beyond all limits. Even in death, Mark was still shielding me as he always had in life. That night, I didn't move for what felt like forever. The silence around me echoing everything I couldn't say out loud, the letter resting on my lap. Part of me ached at knowing Mark had felt the need to prepare for the worst. But another part of me felt profoundly grateful, for he had seen further than I ever imagined, leaving me armor against the knives thrown by my own family. I carefully gathered all the documents into a separate folder. I knew then, I wasn't facing a lie but a deliberate scheme. And to expose it, I needed to stay calm and be absolutely certain. As the first light of dawn spilled through the living room window, I whispered into the empty space. Mark, don't worry. I will protect your honor, and everything we built. My grief was still there, but alongside it grew a fierce resolve. I couldn't let Melissa use my pain as her leverage. I couldn't let Mark's memory be stained by lies. And above all, I couldn't let an innocent child like Lucas grow up inside such a toxic falsehood. I knew I couldn't hold on to all of Mark's evidence alone. I needed someone who could turn what I had into legal truth. The first person I thought of was Richard Hale, a seasoned lawyer and Mark's best friend since his early career. I arranged to meet him at his small downtown Boston office. The same dark wood-paneled room, shelves packed with files, old law degrees on the wall. When I stepped inside, Richard removed his glasses and said in a heavy voice, "Jane, I'm so sorry. Mark was one of the most honest and sharp lawyers I've ever known. Mark prepared a lot before he died. He feared my sister might do something, and she did." I spread all the documents across his desk. The real, notarized will, the vasectomy medical record, the notebook with detailed entries, and Mark's letter. Richard read each page in silence, his brows knitting. "These are indisputable proofs," he said slowly. "But I'm afraid Melissa won't stop. Someone who fabricates a will is definitely planning more than just this. We need the whole picture, not just what's on the surface." He called someone right then and there. Frank Delaney, a retired detective turned private investigator. "Frank has helped me on sensitive cases," Richard explained. "Trust me, Jane, he'll uncover whatever Melissa is hiding." 2 days later, I met Frank in Richard's office. Frank was a solidly built man in his 50s with a steady, gravelly voice. He placed a worn leather notebook beside his coffee cup and looked me straight in the eye. "Mrs. Preston, I'll need every detail. From your relationship with Melissa, to her recent finances, personal life, everything." I told him it all, leaving out nothing. Frank took notes, nodding, occasionally asking pointed questions. "When was the last time she and Mark were alone anywhere? Where is Tyler, the supposed father, now? Any close friends of hers we should look into?" When I mentioned her friend Jenna, the one who opened the door at the birthday party, Frank's eyes lit up. "I'll look into it. In most fraud cases, there's always at least one accomplice hiding behind the scenes." A week later, we met again in Richard's office. On the table was a thick folder Frank had compiled. He got straight to the point. "I'm afraid Melissa's situation is worse than you thought. She's drowning in debt. More than $70,000 spread across credit cards, personal loans, even medical bills for Lucas." Frank slid a stack of papers toward me. "The baby had heart surgery after birth. The costs went far beyond what insurance covered." My hands clenched. No matter how angry I was at Melissa, my heart still hurt for Lucas. "Not only that," Frank went on, "the landlord has sent a notice demanding 4 months of overdue rent. If she doesn't pay, the mother and son will be evicted by the end of this month." My throat tightened. "What about Tyler?" I asked. Frank flipped through a few more pages. "Tyler is gone. I tracked down his new address. He moved to Seattle to live with another woman. The support he sends back is barely $200 a month, and even that isn't consistent. With the debt she's in, Melissa is completely desperate." I closed my eyes, wondering if it was that desperation that drove my sister to pull off such a dirty stunt. But Frank wasn't finished. "There's one more thing you need to know. Melissa has been repeatedly contacting a man named Derek Nolan." "Derek? Who's that?" "A name that isn't unfamiliar to the police." Frank pulled out a few photocopied sheets. 3 arrests for domestic violence, 1 for involvement in a bar fight. Recently, he's been living in the suburbs of Lynn, Massachusetts. What's notable is Melissa's calls and texts to Derek line up with the period right before Lucas was born. The room grew heavy. I could hear my heartbeat pounding hard. "You're saying Derek might be Lucas's biological father?" I asked, my voice shaking. I can't confirm for sure, but there are a lot of signs pointing to that possibility. Melissa texted him multiple times saying, "You need to take responsibility," and "I can't do this alone." After that, their contact dropped off. Seems like Derek completely ignored her. I put a hand over my mouth trying to hold myself together. Lucas was innocent, and if this was true, that child had been dealt a brutally unfair beginning. Richard clasped his hands, thinking hard. If this comes out, Melissa loses all credibility. Her narrative about Mark's son crumbles instantly. But I suspect she knows that, which is why she forged the will to claim what she thinks is her right. Frank pulled out another set of documents. These are messages between Melissa and a friend named Jenna. I extracted them from her phone. He handed me a stack of papers. My eyes scanned each line. Adam's death is my chance. That house is at least 800 grand. I have a will, I get half. Dave says signatures can be faked. He found samples in an old auction article. My hands shook, the papers slipping onto the table. So, Melissa planned everything. Not making up a lie, but actually forging Mark's signature. Exactly. This wasn't impulsive. This was organized fraud. The room was so heavy I could hear the ticking clock on the wall. I thought of Mark, how heartbroken he would have been to know what my sister had done. Then I remembered his letter. "You're not fighting alone. I'm always with you." Fine. If Melissa chose this path, then I won't show mercy. Richard placed a hand on my shoulder, eyes firm. "We'll do everything by the book. But Jane, be prepared. What's coming isn't just a family confrontation. It's a battle to defend Mark's honor and your peace." I invited Melissa to my house on a Saturday afternoon. The living room, where Mark and I once sipped morning coffee, was neatly arranged. I set up 2 chairs facing each other with a low wooden coffee table between them. On the table, besides a pitcher of water and 2 cups, was a small black voice recorder. When the doorbell rang, I took a deep breath and opened it. Melissa stood there in a new coat, heavily made up, her face carrying a forced confidence. "Come in," I said calmly. She stepped inside, her eyes darting around the room and stopping on the recorder. "What's this?" She smirked. "To record our conversation. In Massachusetts, both parties must consent. If you agree, I'll turn it on. It's not to use against you, but so we each have a clear record." Melissa hesitated, then sat down with her arms crossed. "Fine. I have nothing to hide." I read the date, time, and our names out loud, confirming her consent. I squared my shoulders and looked her straight in the eye. "Tell me the whole story. You claim you and Mark had a relationship. Describe it so I can understand." Melissa's eyes flickered as if she had been waiting for this chance to convince me. "All right," she began, voice slightly trembling but determined. 2 years ago, when you and Mark were unhappy, he turned to me. He said you were too busy with work and ignoring him. We met a few times at a hotel downtown. Then, Lucas was born." "Which hotel?" I asked calmly. The Mandarin Oriental," Melissa answered quickly. "Room number?" He blinked, flustered. "High floor. I don't remember exactly." "What days of the week did you usually meet?" "Mostly Tuesdays. Sometimes Thursdays," she said, her voice shrinking. I watched her every move. She was spinning a story, but the pieces didn't fit. What did Mark usually order there? Did he prefer dining in the room or going out? Melissa pressed her lips together, silent for a few seconds, then deflected. "Jane, does that detail even matter?" "It matters. Only someone who was actually there would know." Tension tightened in the air. Melissa grew uneasy but still tried to sound defiant. "You want proof?" "I have the will." "The will." I pulled a folder from the drawer and laid it on the table. "Since you mention wills, I have one too. The original, properly notarized, signed by attorney Richard Hale and 2 witnesses. It leaves everything to me. No Lucas. No Melissa." Her eyes flickered. She forced a smirk. "Maybe he changed it afterward." I opened another envelope. "This is Mark's medical record. Vasectomy performed 2 years ago, confirmed successful." "Do you know what that means, Melissa?" Her face went white. "No, that can't be." "Exactly," I said evenly. Mark could not possibly be Lucas's father. Next, I pulled out a leather notebook and opened it to several entries, sliding it toward her. "This is Mark's journal. He recorded every time you crossed the line. Your midnight texts, suggestive comments at dinner, the unannounced office visits. It's all here. Melissa's hands trembled, but she still tried to deny it. You fake that too. Here are your messages with Jenna, in your own words, about forging Mark's signature, plotting to fake a will, and splitting the house worth $800,000. Melissa's mouth fell open. She collapsed into the chair. Tears began streaming down her face. Gone was her arrogance. Gone was her defiance. Jane. I was desperate. She buried her face in her hands. I'm drowning in debt. Tyler left me. I'm about to be evicted. I didn't know what else to do. I stared at my sister, feeling anger, pity, disgust, and sorrow all at once. So you chose to destroy Mark's honor? You made up an affair right after he died? I know I'm wrong. Melissa sobbed. But I had no choice. Lucas needs medicine, needs doctors. I thought if I got a share of the house I could fix everything. The recorder ticked steadily, capturing every tear. In that moment I understood. Melissa wasn't hiding anymore. The entire truth, both her scam and her desperation, was laid bare. I clicked off the recorder. The dry click echoed in the quiet room. Melissa still sat slumped, shoulders shaking, her face streaked with tears. I looked at my sister, the girl who once shared my childhood bedroom, who once held my hand on our first day of school, now reduced to someone capable of destroying everything sacred to me. Melissa, I have enough evidence to take you to court. Forging a will, defaming the dead, attempted fraud. It's all criminal. She lifted her red, swollen eyes, her voice hoarse. I know. I know. But if you do that, I'll lose everything. Lucas, my son, will have nowhere to live, no one to care for him. At the mention of Lucas, my heart twisted. The child was completely innocent. He hadn't chosen his parents or this chaos. It's because of Lucas I'm still sitting here talking to you. If not, these files would already be in the prosecutor's hands this morning. Melissa stared at me, stunned, unable to believe what she heard. What do you mean? I'm giving you a chance. But this isn't forgiveness. This is to protect Lucas. And to make it work, you must follow every condition. I held up one finger. First, you must publicly admit to the family that you lied. That nothing ever happened between you and Mark. That Lucas has nothing to do with him. And you must apologize. To me and to Mark's memory. Melissa lowered her head and whispered, I can do that. Second, I will set up a trust fund in Lucas's name. Every cent in it will be used only for his education and medical care. You will not be allowed to touch a single dollar for yourself. Why would you still help me, after everything I've done? I'm not doing it for you, I cut in. I'm doing it for Lucas. And for Mark. He would never want a child to suffer just because his mother made mistakes. Melissa burst into tears, covering her face. I kept my voice firm and raised a third finger. Third, you must attend therapy. You need to face your own issues. Jealousy, impulsiveness, the habit of depending on others. A doctor can help you, but only if you truly want to change. I'll go, she sobbed. Not done yet, I said sharply. Fourth, you will take financial counseling. Learn how to manage money, learn to live within your means. And you must keep a stable job. No more living off others or waiting for miracles. If you agree to all of that, I'll keep this quiet. But if you break even one condition, I will hand over every file. From Mark's medical reports, the real will, his journal, to your messages with Jenna, to the lawyers and the authorities. Do you understand? The room went silent. Melissa nodded rapidly, as if clinging to a final lifeline. I understand. I'll do it. Jane, please, don't send me to prison. I don't want Lucas to grow up without a mother. Part of me wanted to scream, to throw her out of my life forever. But another part, the part of me Mark had always loved, told me this might be the only way to save Lucas while forcing Melissa to finally take responsibility for her own life. I folded the file closed and said softly but firmly, this is your last chance. Don't make me regret giving it to you. Her hands clutched the edge of the chair, her whole body trembling. For the first time in years, I saw real weakness, not performance, in my sister's eyes. That night at dinner, the tension in the house was so thick that every clink of a knife on a plate felt like a cut. I sat across from Melissa, our parents on either side, Lucas playing quietly in the living room, his innocent eyes unaware of the storm about to break. It's time, Melissa. She trembled, crushing a napkin in her hands. I saw desperation flicker across her face before she drew a deep breath and spoke. I made it all up. About Mark. About everything. There was no affair, no secret. I did it because I was scared and in debt. I manipulated your love and trust. My father shot to his feet, his chair screeching sharply across the floor. His face turned red, his eyes blazing. All my life I believed in you, Melissa. I defended you from every whisper. And you used that trust to destroy your own sister? Do you know how much shame you've brought on this family? My mother choked on a sob, placing her hand on his arm. Please, at least she told the truth. Truth? My father laughed bitterly. The cost of this truth is years of Jane enduring suspicion, Mark's reputation dragged through the mud even in death. Too little too late. I stayed quiet for a moment before speaking, slow but steady. I don't need anyone to defend me. But I do need clear boundaries. I will take care of Lucas and give him a peaceful future. But I will not allow Melissa to drag me into any more schemes. From now on, sisterhood only exists if you choose to change. Melissa broke down, sobbing into her hands. All my life, I felt like I was standing in your shadow. You were smart, strong, everyone praised you. I felt invisible. I was jealous. I hated that you always had everything while I had nothing. My mother covered her mouth. My father's shoulders slumped, sadness and disappointment mixing in his eyes. I realized then, the bitterness I had sensed all these years wasn't from anything mysterious. It came from a festering wound called jealousy. Melissa, I whispered, I never wanted you to feel small. But jealousy is not an excuse to destroy someone. If you truly want to start over, now is your chance to prove it. 1 year later, I sat in the small backyard garden where Mark used to spend Saturday afternoons planting seeds and tending flowers. Now it bloomed brighter than ever. A quiet testament that love never truly disappears. It simply transforms into something steady and enduring. Lucas ran around laughing, his soft hair glowing under the sunlight. He was healthier than he had been a year ago, thanks to the trust fund I set up to cover his medical treatments, therapy, and schooling. Whenever I saw the life in his eyes, I knew I had made the right choice, protecting him without allowing Melissa to ruin my life again. After her painful confession that night, Melissa started therapy regularly. At first, I doubted she'd stick with it. She had always run from hard work and accountability. But this time, the fear of losing Lucas seemed to change her. I occasionally received updates from her therapist, saying she was cooperating well, learning to manage her finances and emotions. She found a small clerk job at an insurance office. Not glamorous but stable, and I thought that was exactly what she needed. The distance between Melissa and me remained. I didn't expect us to be close again. Trust once shattered is hard to rebuild. But at least we had peace. She stopped lying, stopped begging for money, and when Lucas said, "Aunt Jane," his little voice no longer carried tension. That alone made the journey worth it. As for me, I began rebuilding my life in a new direction. After Mark died, I thought everything had ended with him. But from the pain, I found a new purpose. I created the Mark Preston Foundation, a scholarship fund for struggling law students. I wanted to carry on Mark's legacy, a man who spent his life fighting for justice, and help others walk that path. At the fund's launch, the hall was packed. I stepped onto the stage, my voice shaky but strong. Mark believed that the law wasn't just words, but a way to protect the vulnerable. Today, this foundation carries not just his name but his belief. After the ceremony, I met David, a law professor from the local university. He had helped connect volunteer students to the fund, and it was the first time we really talked. David wasn't like Mark, and I wasn't looking for a replacement. But in his eyes, I saw a calm warmth, something I hadn't realized I still needed. We began to talk more about famous cases, books, everyday things like pasta from an Italian cafe near the campus and his habit of growing tomatoes in pots. I realized some wounds don't need to heal overnight. They need to be surrounded by simple, gentle things, and they slowly mend themselves. One afternoon, after Lucas had fallen asleep for his nap, I stepped into the garden. The lavender Mark planted last year was in full bloom, their fragrance drifting in the breeze. I placed my hand on a flower and whispered as if he were still beside me, "You're not here anymore, but your love and your preparations protect me every single day." In that moment, I felt peace. Not because the pain was gone, but because I had learned to live with it and keep moving forward. Somewhere in that garden, I could almost feel Mark smiling, approving. Every story leaves a mark on us. Sometimes a scar, sometimes a seed for rebirth. For me, this journey with Lucas, with Melissa, and with Mark's memories wasn't just a series of events. It was a reminder that family is never perfect. What matters is knowing what to hold close, what to release, and what to nurture as we go on. What about you? In my situation, would you have offered a conditional forgiveness to keep a part of your family intact? Or would you have cut ties completely to protect yourself? Every choice carries its own weight, and I believe each of us would answer differently. If this story moves you, please don't hesitate to share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. And if you'd like to stay on this journey with me, don't forget to follow the channel to explore more stories of family, hardship, and hope, where sometimes a single tear or a quiet smile can change an entire life.